Hello, this is Corncod1 of Nationalist News and Notes. I found this interesting YouTube channel. It goes by the name of Cassius, Cassius, or something on that order. They're very good because what they have is speeches of various European nationalist leaders and other similar materials with English subtitles. So you can listen to a speech by Mr. Salvini, Mademoiselle Le Pen, and other European nationalist leaders, and you can actually get a very good idea of their oratory and the way they look at the world. And so one of the great treats, I think, is finding out what a fine speaker and an intelligent man Alexander Gauland is. Gauland is, as you remember, the co-leader of the Alternative for Germany party. And I think he's a wonderful orator. And he has a very interesting history. Apparently, he was a Christian Democrat politician for many years, veteran Christian Democrat, holding many state level, and I think he even held a ministerial post once in Germany. So he was a man with a very distinguished political career before going over to before helping to form, actually, the Alternative for Germany party and being the head of its somewhat more nationalistic faction. Gauland, back in 2012, Gauland was part of a little informal group of German politicians who were becoming disenchanted with Angela Merkel, and they would meet on a regular basis and discuss what they could do, because their idea was that Merkel was in no sense, in any sense actually, any kind of conservative politician, even on the European model, and they were thinking of ways to make the Christian Democrat Party better. You know, the CSU. But he's a very interesting gentleman. He is really a great orator. More in the classical tradition. You listen to somebody like Trump, and you listen to somebody like Salvini. Salvini in Italy, for example, is basically Donald Trump on steroids. He's more Trump than Trump as an orator. Very simple style. But, Dr. Gauland is more of a classic orator, but you can tell the man had a very good education. I think he got his doctorate in law, but he also studied a lot of political science, which is kind of interesting because Gauland has written several books. All of them, it seems, are of a historical nature. So he's actually somewhat of a distinguished historian, and he brings that into many of his speeches. I mean, some of his speeches are purely political in terms of practical politics, and they're very pithy speeches. But very often he'll talk about historical precedences. I've heard him quote, people like Bismarck. I've heard him quote people like Queen Victoria. He has a great interest in English history, as well as a great interest in 18th century German political history, as well as modern German political history. So if you compare him to some of his colleagues in the Bundestag, I mean, the guy is a giant. It's just like the usual leftists we have to deal with. a populist nationalist makes an intelligent contribution to the debate most of the time, but leftists, it seems, both in the United States and in Europe, they're just people who make rote denunciations, just using sort of the same old tired leftist slogans, racist, sexist, homophobe, blah blah blah, without even saying why these things are bad. They think the views of their leftist friends are simply axiomatic. And so I've come to really, really after doing a little research and after seeing some of his speeches on that Cassius YouTube channel, I've come to have a great, great respect for Gauland. I'm kind of not surprised, because if you remember back in 2017, when Alternative for Germany got into the Bundestag with a very large group. They went from having 0 people in the Bundestag to having 11 or 12% of the people in that legislative body, which really disrupted German politics, which is a good thing. He did a good job helping to organize the party. And then his inclination after the elections was, well, okay, I'm an old man now. Maybe I'll just stay in the Bundestag for a while or retire. And the members of Alternative for Germany, they didn't like that at all, and they said, no. You're going to come and be one of our leaders. And that's exactly what happened. I think because of the great respect for the man and his intelligence and education and sophistication. If you think that these European nationalist leaders are schlubs off the street just because they're populists, no. Gauland is a very estimable person, and this is probably this is not the first time that Germany has turned to, at least in some ways, has turned to an older man for guidance. You got to remember, who was the first West German chancellor, right? It was Adenauer, who was an old man and stayed in office as an old man for a long time. Whatever you may think of his approach, he was very well respected by Germans and is still well respected today. So there may be situations in which Germans go and depend on an old man. I guess you could say in the 20s and 30s they did the same thing with General Hindenburg. So I think that's sort of in the German character. I think Gauland is one of the more interesting figures on the European nationalist populist right, and I look forward to more interesting things from him in the future. This is Cord Cod 1 of Nationalist News and Notes, signing off.